Here's a strange question. Why would a brain choose something it doesn't even enjoy anymore? Not something it's confused about. Not something it's been tricked into. Something it has, by now, directly experienced the downside of again and again and still reaches for. That's not a failure of logic. It's not a character flaw. It's the result of two separate systems in your brain that, for most of human history, work together perfectly, and under certain conditions come apart. By the end of this video, you'll understand why it's possible to want something you don't even like anymore. And once you see how it works, a lot of behavior that looks irrational from the outside stops looking irrational at all. Let's start with the common misunderstanding. The usual explanation people reach for is that the behavior must still feel good. Otherwise, why keep doing it? If someone keeps returning to something that's clearly costing them, the assumption is that the payoff must be outweighing the cost, at least in their head. More pleasure than pain, or they wouldn't do it. But researchers studying motivation found something that breaks this assumption completely. And it comes down to a distinction most people have never heard of: the difference between wanting something and liking something. This sounds like the same thing. It isn't. In the brain, wanting and liking are handled by at least partly separate systems. Liking is the pleasure response, the part that makes something feel good in the moment. Wanting is the pull, the motivational drive that makes you seek something out. Under ordinary circumstances, these two track each other closely. You want the things you like roughly in proportion to how much you like them. But research on incentive-sensitization, work most associated with psychologists Terry Robinson and Berridge, found that with repeated exposure to certain rewarding experiences, the wanting system can become more sensitive over time, while the liking system doesn't rise the same way and can even decline. The two systems drift apart. The result is a state where the pull towards something intensifies, while the actual pleasure it delivers shrinks. You end up chasing an experience that used to feel good, driven by a wanting system that's now firing harder than ever, even as the payoff gets smaller. That alone reframes the whole question. Why do you keep going back to it if it's not even good anymore? Assumes wanting requires liking. It doesn't. There's a second piece to this puzzle, and it involves how behavior itself is controlled in the brain. Early on, when you first try something, your brain treats it the way it treats most new actions, as goal-directed. You're weighing the outcome, deciding, choosing. But behavioral neuroscience, particularly work from researchers like Everitt and Trevor Robbins, has shown that with enough repetition, control over a behavior can shift from goal-directed circuits toward habit circuits, centered on a brain region called the dorsal striatum. Once a behavior becomes habitual, it starts running off cues rather than off outcomes. The action gets triggered by context, a place, a feeling, a time of day, largely independent of whether the outcome is actually still good for you. This is a well-documented shift, and it explains something that trips a lot of people up. The sense that, I know this is bad for me and I'm doing it anyway, like some part of me isn't even consulting that information. That's not a metaphor. Habit-based behavior genuinely runs with less input from the outcome evaluation system than goal-directed behavior does. Two systems not fully overlapping, one that can see the long-term cost clearly, and one that's already moving before that information gets factored in. Let's put this together with an example. Imagine someone who, early on, turned to a specific behavior because it relieved stress and felt good. In the beginning, wanting and liking are aligned, it feels good, and they want it because it feels good. Over time, with enough repetition, two things can happen at once. The wanting system sensitizes, so the urge intensifies, and the behavior shifts from something they're actively choosing to something increasingly cued and automatic. Eventually, they can be in a state where the pull is stronger than ever, the enjoyment is smaller than ever, and the behavior is running more on habit than on decision. From the outside, it looks baffling. From the inside, it can genuinely feel involuntary because significant parts of it are. There's one more thread worth pulling on. For many people, part of what keeps a harmful behavior in place isn't the pursuit of a positive feeling at all. It's the relief of an uncomfortable one. Psychologists distinguish between positive reinforcement, where a behavior is maintained because it produces something pleasant, and negative reinforcement, where a behavior is maintained because it removes or reduces something unpleasant: stress, boredom, a low mood, physical discomfort. A behavior that relieves a negative state can become deeply entrenched even without much positive payoff at all, because escaping discomfort is, itself, a powerful motivator for the brain to repeat an action. Put these three findings together: a wanting system that can outpace liking, control that shifts from deliberate choice toward automatic habit, and reinforcement that can come from relief as much as reward. And the picture that emerges is very different from they must still be enjoying it or they'd stop. The behavior can be sustained by mechanisms that have almost nothing to do with how good it currently feels. None of this means the behavior is beyond a person's influence, and it doesn't mean it's purely mechanical either. Human motivation involves conscious thought, values, and context too. What the evidence points to is an interaction. Learned wanting, shifting behavioral control, and relief-based reinforcement, layered on top of a person's actual life circumstances. So the next time you see someone or notice in yourself a pull towards something that clearly isn't paying off anymore, it's worth remembering that wanting and worth it are not the same signal. The brain can want something with real intensity long after it's stopped delivering anything good at all. And that might be the most counterintuitive thing about human motivation. Desire was never actually a reliable measure of what's good for us. It's a measure of what the brain has learned to chase, and those two things can quietly split apart without you ever noticing the moment it happened.